Namaste. My name is Sunyana Pal, and before I start, I would want to thank Prasanna for this wonderful opportunity for letting me share some of my words. And thank you all for being here. Like I said, my name is Sunyana Pal. I was born in Mumbai, and a year after our marriage, we moved to Connecticut and then to Maryland, and now here I am. I live in Maryland with two of my sons and my husband and my plants and an invincible goldfish because it's been so alive. And I have studied in Exelara University and in Annamala University. And I have been widely published in many anthologies and journals. And last 2 months back, I published my book, Refugees in Their Own Country. It commemorates the 75th anniversary of independence, and hence it has 75 verses. I also work as a director of the Poetry Academy, and in whatever free time I get, I try to meditate heartfulness meditation. If you want to know more about me, we'll figure it out in the end. The first question Prasanna has asked me is, why do I write poetry? And I have been thinking about it for a long time, and I really don't know. I never thought as a kid that I would ever write poetry, or even write as such. I know I have this really strong desire to document whatever I'm doing, but or small moments that happen, like the color changing of the trees. I feel like writing about it. It is just because it was COVID, and which also is a good segue to the next question, which is, what do you write about? Before COVID, I always wrote about family. I wrote about love or spirituality, or many poems about relations in life. But something happened in COVID. Maybe it is midlife crisis, as my cousins like to joke about it. But I realized that so little of me is in me, or in my children as well. But in me, I don't know where I have come from, which is when I started exploring Sindh. I started learning about Sindh. And many of these poems that came to me were, or whatever thoughts came to me, were best suited to be written in a poetry. And I kept writing, but I didn't know what would happen with them. I didn't know where I would publish them. And it's a whole different journey of how that book came along and how things have happened. So I guess I really again want to thank you all for listening, and I'm going to start with my first poem, which is called Where Does Good Poetry Stay? Where does good poetry stay? Not in books, I know for sure. I've only found empty cocoons on the unmitigated pages. I searched for poetry in my memories and found echoes of the past still hiding in the crevices. Sometimes I find poetry dancing on top of trees when no one's watching. Once it twirled with my giggling toddlers, playing alone and making them laugh at themselves. It lingers around the comfort of elaborate home cooked meals that get consumed in minutes. It relaxes in a tub with soaking salt and lavender oil and thoughts. Sometimes it whispers to you as you rock on your chair at 3:30 in the morning, awaiting dawn. The next poem I'm going to read is called The Tiny Almond. And I don't know if you know this, but normally peaches have, if you break open the shell, there's a small almond in it. And now I know that, okay, there is cyanide in it and probably you shouldn't consume it. But back in the days, I didn't know that. So the poem is called The Tiny Almond. Without caring for the actual peach, we would wait for Ma to break open the seed. She'd open it in her copper mortar and pound it with the pestle. Chutki, Dad, and I would surround her like vultures as she'd beg for elbow room. If the pit of the peach pried open with the tiny almond unbroken, she'd hit the pestle again to divide the prize evenly. But none of us ever gave her a share. This next poem is called The Flower, and this is about my son and me 3 years back. In the early days of spring, under a silky cerulean sky, my son picked a flower for me. the ones that only toddlers find, playing with the tender green blades. He held it gingerly, smiled, and placed his treasured gift in his pocket, skipped away to explore his surroundings. A breath after coming home, he fished in his pocket, but his grin diminished. He removed his hand with a mangled ball of the flower. His mourning eyes looked at me until I took the crushed violet, caressed it with my lip, and placed it as my crown. The next poem is about my dad. The poem is called Choosing Memories. My dad passed 10 years back, and this thing happened, I think, a year after he was gone. And I was looking at an album, and I saw this picture that I'm going to talk about. And funnily, I didn't write about it immediately, but there was a contest about Singapore or Thailand or something, wherein you were to write a poetry about that. And I this thought then came to me directly, and I was like, you know, this is what I should write about, and this is the poem. It is called Choosing Memories. I flip the album and see the statue of Merlin in Singapore, group of fun-loving teenagers huddled around it. One particular man, tall and aristocratic, big side locks and a full set of dark hair, flared pants, stylish and fashionable, his smile genuine and genuine. I keep the album down and look at the frame in front of me. Portrait of the same man, still aristocratic and dignified, still with thick side locks but bald, no smile. Even though I told him to, he didn't think it was necessary. Wonder if it would have changed his mind if he knew that this would be his last picture in the house by which he would be remembered. I pick the album again and flip to another page. He's trying to drink the water falling from the lion's mouth. He seems jovial and mischievous, a side I seldom saw in the 27 years he cared for me. I flip the page again. He's at a bridge, the river and the whole city in backdrop. But he's alone with the same genuine smile. I keep looking at the smile and decide to remember my dad with it. The next poem is called Biswas Yogyo. Um, I am a Sindhi, but I married a Bengali. And this happened when it happened in the first 1 year of marriage when I was trying to learn Bengali. Everyone asks me, why have you learned Bengali? I'm like, how will I complain to my mom-in-law if I don't know the language? Because they don't know Hindi that well. So I used to always have to complain. Hence, Viswas Yogyo. My husband said a word, Viswas Yogyo, in a sentence of pure and musical Bangla, which I'm still trying to learn. Instead of asking him the meaning, I search the colorful search engine, conveniently the homepage of my phone, which also thankfully helps me answer the multifarious questions that spring in my toddler's mind, sometimes making me question my education on some of those days. And also the authenticity in the articles, which I do so trustfully read and try to follow. Ironically, also the meaning of Viswas Yogyo. What is worthy of our blind trust? The next poem that I have is actually in Hindi. This is the only poem I have written in Hindi. Like many people ask me, do you write, what do you write in? Do you write in your mother tongue? I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't, I really wish one day I can, but somehow I have been trained because of school to think in Hindi, and somehow those thoughts also come out in Hindi, in English. I'm sorry, in English. So hence, I I have always written in English. And once I was listening to the late Rahat Indori ji, and it was fabulous. I was so much in awe. And it was when we had just moved to the US, like a year, maybe less than a year after that. And this is what I felt during those times. And hence, this poem is in Hindi because of Rahat Indori ji, but this sentiments are still mine. दरवाजे के पीछे एक ऊंची बिल्डिंग की 10वीं मंजिल पे एक दरवाजा है, उसके पीछे मैं रहता हूँ. I should tell you that this poem is from an old man's perspective. It's not my perspective, but the feelings are still mine. I'll start again. एक ऊंची बिल्डिंग की 10वीं मंजिल पे एक दरवाजा है, उसके पीछे मैं रहता हूँ. मेरे बगल में दरवाजे के पीछे भी कोई रहता है. जब स्टील का कोई बर्तन गिरता है, मैं समझ जाता हूँ कि घर पर कोई है. जब चाबी की छनकार होती है, मैं संभल जाता हूँ, घर से कोई बाहर जा रहा है. जब पैरों की आहट होती है, मैं रुक जाता हूँ. क्या मुझसे मिलने वो आ रहा है? पर मुझसे मिलने कोई नहीं आता. कोई अजनबी क्यों आएगा जब मेरा बेटा ही नहीं आता? और बारिश हो रही है. आज बारिश हो रही है. ना टीवी चल रहा है ना फोन. मैं सोफे पे बैठा हूँ, अखबार पढ़ रहा हूँ. लगता है वो भी कुछ कुछ हलचल नहीं हो रही. शायद वो भी बेबस है. सोचता हूँ मिलने जाऊं, पर कहीं वो डिस्टर्ब तो नहीं होगा, कहीं वो बुरा तो नहीं मानेगा. इतने दिन गुजर गए, वो कभी मिलने क्यों नहीं आया? क्या उसे अकेलापन नहीं होता? क्या वो बात नहीं करना चाहता? मैं पहल क्यों करूं? बारिश तेज हो रही है, खिड़की बंद कर देता हूँ. आना कभी मिलने. एक ऊंची बिल्डिंग की 10वीं मंजिल पे दरवाजे के पीछे मैं रहता हूँ. This is the last poem from my olden writing days, and next I'll read poems from my book. This poem is called Without a Garden. A friend of mine recently had gone to India for 4 months, and her husband couldn't keep her plants alive. And something stirred in my heart. I said, a house feels very empty, without plants for me. So hence, this poem came. The deserted white marble sill awaits the pregnant clay pots, off-shooting rainbow dots in various dimensions, instantly filling nostrils and eager heart. The vacant somber grill lingers for the vibrant, breathing and alive green, craving for its soft, gentle dance, caressing the black iron cast. The blank glass pane aches for the plant to complete its frame. Undecorated and dull is a life without a garden. Now I'm reading some poems from my book, Refugees in Their Own Country. Brothers, they fought together for their land, for their freedom, hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder. They fought together without worry, without fear, sweat mixed with sweat, blood mixed with blood. They fought together without realizing they'd also fight each other. Maybe before I get into the book is about the India and Pakistan partition, but it is from a Sindhi perspective. Like the people of Sindh didn't get their state. Punjab was divided, Bengal was also divided, but Sindh went completely to Pakistan, and everybody had to migrate. And somehow I feel that this is not known yet somewhere about the pain that only Sindhis can understand of not having your own land. Puzzles. I have solved many of various kinds, but I can't piece together the lies that fed men or continue to fight against the country they once belonged to. At the threshold. This poem is about everything that Sindhis left at the threshold. They left their khuse at the door, not knowing they would have to run barefoot. They left the hot koki on the kutaji thali to eat daan from banana leaves. They left the empty sky that never cried, ever thirsting to learn new things. They left the kafi and siraiki to hear hushes, swears, and cries. They left the Cheti Chand's Jumelo celebrating their savior from Mirksha. They left the lights twinkling only to see them from Dongar Hill. They left not knowing they'd never go back. Many Sindhis thought that they would end up going back, but here we are. Next poem is called Refugees. They spoke of home, of the sand, of the henna, of the hatred, of the blood, of the partition, of the leaving, of the struggle, of returning, of wanting to return, of the compensation received for the only home they had known, but never feeling at home. Before I go into my last poem, the last poem that I have for Sindh, there's one poem I want to read about fall. It's very very beautiful now in Maryland where I stay, and I really like how autumn changes so much in nature. This poem is called Broken Leaf. Broken leaf floats to earth unaware of its direction or destination. Carelessly with the wind it turns, unsure of my future, I stumble towards it. The last poem that I have from my book is actually also the last poem in the book. It is called A Minute of Silence. And I hope we can keep 10 seconds of silence after I finish the poem, and I would then like to thank you. Please stay with me. A minute of silence for memories of torture which will never get shared, for the people never found words to describe them, stories of horror which will never get shared, for people were killed with them. I really, really thank you. And I want to thank Prasanna again for making all of this work. And thank you all for listening. This is all I have. Please follow me on my Instagram channel called Learning About Sindh. I'll be posting poems and about Sindh in there. And if you want to know more about me, please visit sunyanapal.com. Thank you again.